of Jamaica, and Your Holiness. Thank you both for joining us this evening. President Lasso, who took office just over a year ago, is a businessman, an ideas generator, and an author of 2 books, who has dedicated his career to helping to shape a better future for Ecuador and for this hemisphere. Upon assuming office, President Lasso immediately undertook a massive and very successful COVID vaccination campaign in Ecuador. Last year, he oversaw economic growth of more than 4 percentage points by encouraging and increasing investment, and just yesterday received unanimous approval for Ecuador to join the UN Security Council. And Ambassador Thomas Greenfield is here today. Congratulations. President Lasso will be with us for just a short period, so I will launch directly into a conversation with him, and then afterwards we will formally open the event. And those in person, feel free to please start your course on your tables. We will speak in Spanish. There is translation, so if you need translation, please put it on. And if you need one, raise your hand and someone will bring it over to you. Bueno, señor presidente, primero, felicitaciones por este.
Mr. President, congratulations, and also for the announcement today regarding the integration of Ecuador as the 4th country in the Alliance for Development and Democracy, 2 very important accomplishments for Ecuador in this week. In your opinion, what were the most important achievements at this summit, and what is left pending? What has yet to be done in the future?
En primer lugar, muy buenas noches a todos ustedes.
First of all, I'd like to welcome you all. I'm happy to be able to be present at this event because of the Summit of the Americas. We've had very intense days of activity. I think our friend here is looking for a headset, perhaps. Let's see if they can get a headset.
Somebody need translation?
No, la traducción está ahí. Ah, okay. Es solo el aparato que hace falta.
Okay, just the receiver. They were missing a receiver.
Bueno,
well, as I was saying, thank you for this invitation due to the Summit of the Americas.
Tan pronto
as soon as we got here to Los Angeles on noon, Tuesday, we started to have a very, very busy agenda from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. I hope that after these 4 days, I don't lose my concentration after. I hope that I speak rationally at this presentation after all that. It's a Friday evening. Did you want to ask me questions one at a time, or how would you like? Well, let's start out, in your opinion, what are the greatest achievements of this summit? I believe this summit is important. It's the first one after the pandemic. It's the first one for President Biden. It's the first summit for me as well in the United States. And it's been an important summit where the main focus has been migration. Ecuador gave the final speech with the signing of the Los Angeles Declaration, which focuses on migration. And I was given that honor because 2 weeks ago, I signed an executive decree which orders the legalization of close to 15,000 Venezuelans who are refugees in Ecuador.
Gracias. No era para mí, era
para
ellos.
It wasn't for me, it was for them, but thank you. Okay, now you have it, if you'd like it.
500,000 venezolanos refugiados en
Ecuador. 500,000 Venezuelan refugees in.
Sino lo que queremos es que se incorporen
a la vida what we like is for them to be incorporated into the economic activity of Ecuador. And
legalización al punto en que
Why
van
is
a
it
tener
important
una
to
cédula
discuss
de identidad como
legalization?
todos
They
los
are going to
ecuatorianos.
have an identity
sacarlos
card,
de un mundo de
identification card, just
explotación
like all
laboral,
other
de
Ecuadorians,
explotación
in order
sexual,
to bring them out of
para
the
darles
world of
acceso a
exploitation,
educación,
sexual
a salud
exploitation, to give them
gratuita,
access to
y como digo,
education,
se
to free
incorporan a
health
la
care.
vida
They will be
socioeconómica del Ecuador.
incorporated into the socio-economic
El Ecuador es
activities
un país
in
pequeño,
Ecuador. Ecuador is a small
de renta
country,
media,
middle-level income.
pero esta decisión
But
yo la baso
this
en
decision
principios
is
de
based
humanismo.
on the principles
Y
of
es
humanism.
En la casa de un
And
pobre,
in the home of a
cuando se
poor
llega a la hora
person,
del almuerzo,
when it's lunchtime,
todos almuerzan.
everybody
Todo
has
el que
lunch.
llega almuerza.
Everybody who shows up
Le
gets
ponen un
lunch.
poquito más de agua a la
They put a
sopa
little
y
bit more
alcanza para
water in the
todos.
soup, and there's enough for everyone.
Esa es la actitud
This
nuestra.
is our
Un país de
attitude.
renta media que le abre
A
las puertas a
country,
los
a mid-level
venezolanos.
country that
Tenemos
opens its
problemas
doors
con
to
escasez de
Venezuelans.
empleo.
We have
Y
a
ahora
shortage
es un
of
problema también
employment, and
recibir a
now
nuevos
it is
ciudadanos que van a
an
demandar
additional
empleo
problem
en
to
el Ecuador.
receive new citizens who
Pero
will
creo
also
que
demand
es,
jobs in
una
Ecuador.
obligación desde el punto
But
de
I
vista
believe it is an
humanista,
obligation from the
poder,
humanistic point of view to
legalizar
be
la
able to
presencia de los
legalize the
venezolanos
presence of
en Ecuador.
Venezuelans
Y
in
ha sido
Ecuador.
un
And
paso muy,
it's
muy
been a
importante
very,
y
very
muy bien
important
visto a
step
toda la región. Me
and
encantaría
very
su
welcome
opinión
in
sobre
the
la
region.
Declaración de Los
I'd like
Ángeles
to hear
y
your
cómo lo
opinion
ve
on the
como un
Declaration of
paso,
Los Angeles and how
para,
you see this
regularizar
as a
las
step
crisis
to
migratorias en la región.
regularize migratory
paso
issues in the
importante.
region. This is an
En primer
important
lugar, es la
step. First
primera
of
vez
all,
que en una
it's the
cumbre
first time
se
that
habla
at
del
a
tema de
summit
la
we
migración.
discuss the
Y se
subject
habla
of migration.
precisamente aquí,
And it is
en
discussed
California,
precisely
en la
here
ciudad
in
de Los
California,
Ángeles,
in Los Angeles,
donde la mayoría
where
de los
most
habitantes de Los
people,
Ángeles
most
precisamente
inhabitants in Los Angeles
vienen de una
come,
migración o tienen
are migrants or have
más de una nacionalidad
have more than one
y se han
nationality
incorporado
and have
a
been
construir el
incorporated
crecimiento de este
in
importante
building
estado de los Estados
this
Unidos
very important
de la
state here
Unión.
in the United States.
Y yo creo que es
It's
significativo
significant
que el gobierno de
that
los Estados Unidos
the
haya promovido
U.S.
una
government
cumbre
has
donde
promoted
el
a
tema
summit where
central
the central
es la
subject, the
migración.
central issue
¿Qué
is
ve como los próximos pasos
migration. And what
después
the
esta
future
declaración? Y
steps do you
también,
see after
en
this
su opinión,
declaration?
los
And in
próximos
your
pasos
opinion,
después de esta
what are
cumbre,
the
¿no?
next
Ha
steps
sido
after this
una
summit?
semana de muchas
It's been a week
actividades, muchos
full of
anuncios.
activities, a lot of
El
announcements.
presidente de Chile
The president
hoy
of
en la
Chile
mañana
this
cuando nos
morning,
tomábamos la
when we
foto
were
oficial de la cumbre
taking
me
the
dice,
official
oye,
photo for the summit, he
me
said,
ha gustado lo que has hecho.
I like what
Lo
you've
voy a tomar
done.
como ejemplo,
I'm going to
aunque
use
esto
this as an
significa un costo
example, although
político dentro de Chile,
this
lo
will
voy a
have a
impulsar.
political cost in
Ahí
Chile,
está
but
el
I'm going to
beneficio de la
promote
cumbre.
it. That in itself
Ese
is
es
a
un
benefit
beneficio
of the
concreto,
summit. This is a
el
concrete
presentar
benefit
casos
of
de
the summit,
éxito,
to present success
casos,
stories,
digamos, de mejores
as
prácticas en materia de política
best
pública
practices in
de
terms of public
refugiados.
policy
Y esto es
in
lo que
in
irradia
terms
una
of
cumbre,
refugees. This
el
is
que
what
aparezca en los medios, que
radiates
se
from a
trate,
summit,
que ustedes
that
me
it be
inviten, que tú
in
me
the
tomes
press, in the
la
media,
lección
that you
sobre el tema
invite
de la
me,
cumbre
that you
alrededor de la
provide
migración,
the
que el
readout
presidente
on
de Chile me diga
the
lo que me ha
subject
dicho,
of
y el
migration, what
presidente
the
de
president
Colombia
of
diga,
Chile
bueno, qué
says, what
bien,
he said, what the
nosotros
president
también hemos hecho
of
algo
Colombia has
importante en
said as well.
Colombia.
Not only
Ellos
have
le
we done
dieron
something
un
important
estatus
in
de 10
Colombia,
años.
they gave tenure
Nosotros
status.
es
We,
indefinido.
in our case, it's indefinite status.
Pensamos que es la mejor
We
manera
believe that
de
this is the best way
proteger a seres humanos que
to
por
protect
razones
human
que
beings
escapan
who,
a su control tienen que
for
salir
situations
despavoridos
beyond
de
their
su
control,
país
have to leave
por
their
malas
countries,
políticas
flee their countries
públicas
due to
en materia económica. Un
poor
país tan rico como
public
Venezuela que no
policies
pueda
in economic terms.
sostener un
Such a
modelo de
wealthy
prosperidad
country as
para
Venezuela
repartir
that has
riqueza
been
entre sus
unable to
ciudadanos.
sustain
Entonces yo creo que esto es
to
importante.
share
El
the
hecho
wealth
de que
among its
estemos hablando
citizens.
de
This
este
is
tema
important.
aquí
The subject
justifica
that
la
we're
cumbre.
discussing here,
Cuando
this
están
in itself
regresando a
justifies
Quito, yo sé
the
que
summit.
parte de la conversación
You're going
antes
back
de
to
la cumbre ha sido
Quito.
la
I know
importancia de
that
la cumbre para los pueblos, para la
before
gente
the summit,
de las Américas. Cuando
we
regresa
spoke about
a
the
Ecuador, ¿qué va
importance
a decir
of the summit
al
for the
pueblo
people. But once
ecuatoriano
you go
sobre la
back to
importancia de
Ecuador,
esta
what will
cumbre?
you tell the people of Ecuador
Hablaré
regarding the
sobre
importance of the
migración, pero
summit?
hablaré
Well, I'll
también sobre
discuss
seguridad,
migration,
que
but
fue
I
un
will
tema
also
que lo
discuss
planteó el Ecuador
security.
muy
This is
claramente.
something that Ecuador spoke of
Una de las
very
más
clearly.
grandes amenazas,
One of the
si ustedes
greatest
me
threats,
preguntan a mí,
if you ask
es
may. What keeps you awake at night, Mr. President? What keeps me awake at night is drug trafficking, the weapons trafficking, the trafficking of people. What keeps me awake at night, the violence derived from all those activities that are affecting Ecuador at present. That is why I've discussed the subject here at the summit very concretely to our main trade partner, the United States. I've said we have to get out of this together. And in your opinion, for Ecuador, what is the priority with the United States in the future? Security and trade. We are the only country of the coast, the Pacific coast of the Americas, that does not have a free trade agreement with the United States. And this is not the fault of the United States. This is the fault of Ecuador, because we had a government that, due to ideological reasons, did not want to be a part of the negotiations along with Colombia and Peru. But it is up to me now to make up for lost time, and the United States will have to have patience with us, Ecuador, to say we can't be the only country, a small country of the Pacific coast, that doesn't have a free trade agreement with the United States. Now, it's perhaps something that is no longer said, a phrase that is no longer used, but we have to find a way for Ecuador not to lose the opportunity to make up for lost time in regards to Colombia and Peru. Well, you have the commitment of the Atlantic Council in this regard to have a closer relationship with the United States. It's been a great honor for me to speak with you. I know you have another meeting to go to. I'd like to thank your Ivana Baki, your excellent ambassador in Washington. This is a lovely room, but next time I'd like to see you in Quito. I have no problem staying a few more minutes. They've all come here to hear a presentation, so if you have time for another question, I would be delighted. Well, perhaps a message. I do have a message for everyone. Ecuador is currently a country of opportunities. It is a country that has one clear concept: more Ecuador in the world and more world in Ecuador. More Ecuador in the world means more trade, more trade relations with the world. We have an objective, and that is to have free trade agreements with the largest economies of the world. We are currently negotiating with China, South Korea, Israel, Canada. And there is an opening with the United States with a very specific modality, but we are making progress along those lines. I've just had an agreement here at the summit with Costa Rica, a very important Central American economy, and we're making progress with Panama as well. And then we'll have approach economies, let's say, to call them non-traditional, with Turkey, with India, always seeking markets for our products, bananas, shrimp, flour, coffee. This means jobs in our country. That means that there will be no migration outside our borders. This is important. And in addition to this investment from the world into Ecuador, this will bring jobs to Ecuador, but also opportunities for profitable sectors. We have hydrocarbons, energy, minerals, infrastructure, and we even have a government bank that we'd like to sell, and it's in the sales process already. Ecuador is a country of opportunities. It's a wonderful country. For those of you who are not familiar with our country, we have 4 fabulous regions. The first, most well-known, is the Galapagos Islands, which is the it's a World Heritage Site. I'd like to tell you that in January, we expanded from 138,000 to 200,000 square kilometers. This deserves applause. This is the expansion of the Galapagos protected
Y estuve
area.
otro día cuando
And
fue el anuncio del
I
acuerdo
heard an
marítimo
announcement
con todos los países de la costa, ¿no?
Así
of
es.
an agreement with
Luego,
all the countries,
eh,
the coastal countries.
esa fue una
Yes, that's
iniciativa
right.
de Chile muy
That was a
interesante
Chilean
también.
incentive, which was very
Luego tenemos
interesting
la
as
región
well.
amazónica,
And then we have the
la
Amazon
selva
region,
ecuatoriana,
the
desde el punto de
Ecuadorian
vista
jungle.
turístico es
From the
espectacular.
touristic point of view, it is
Yo bromeo un
spectacular.
poco con mis
I joke
hijos,
with my children.
diciéndoles,
I
ustedes
say,
llevan a mis nietos
you take my
a
grandchildren
Park Jungle o a
to Park
Animal
Jungle or
Kingdom.
Animal Kingdom.
El original está en la
The
Amazonía.
original is in the Amazon.
Ahí tocas el árbol
That's
y
where
es de
you can
verdad, no es
touch
de
a
plástico.
tree, and it's a real tree.
Y
It's
ahí
not
ves que
plastic.
cuando
There
llueve
you
te
can
cae
see that
una
when it
cantidad de
rains,
agua muy grande,
you get a
pasa
tremendous
la
amount of
lluvia
rainfall,
y
and the
luego
rain
el
goes
sol se
away,
encarga
and
de
then the
secar tu
sun
copa.
dries your
Es natural.
clothes. It's
La
natural.
costa ecuatoriana,
The
que es muy bella,
Ecuadorian
con unas
coast is
playas
very beautiful with
hermosas.
lovely
Y por
beaches.
último, la sierra,
And
con Quito
lastly,
como
the
capital del
mountain
Ecuador, con el
ranges
centro
with
histórico más bello, más
Quito,
lindo de
with the
América
most
Latina.
lovely
El
historical
tour de
center
las
in all of
iglesias
Latin
es
America.
algo
The tour of the
maravilloso.
churches
Iglesias de la
is something
época
that's
colonial
fabulous.
como la
Churches
compañía,
from the colonial
todo
era,
con
such as La
revestimiento de pan
Compañía,
de oro.
and it
Bueno,
is all
señor
covered
presidente,
in
espero que
gold.
tenemos ahora un salón de
We
150
have
más visitantes a Ecuador
150 more
en el
visitors that will
Encantado.
soon be in Ecuador.
Bienvenidos al Ecuador.
We welcome you all
Muchas
to
gracias por
Ecuador.
muchas
Once
gracias
again,
a
thank you
ustedes
very
también.
much. Thank you
Muy
all.
amable.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Te agradezco mucho. ¿Por dónde
Thank you very
salimos?
much. Which way out?
Solo.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Atlantic Council Vice Chair Robert J. Abernathy.
Welcome. Isn't this a great evening? We just heard, 15,000 immigrants going into Ecuador. Fantastic news. That's enough to celebrate for the evening. And also all the good work that he's doing, that all of you are doing, that are leading toward more trade and economic development that produces jobs and money for families to live a life like they want to live in happiness. So I'm glad you're here. To the City of the Angels, the Atlantic Council is sponsoring this event tonight. We were formed in 1961 to try to foster relationships between the hemisphere that we're all in and Europe for peace and security and for trade and freedom and democracy. So it's a great history. Hope you become more familiar with what the good works that we do. We are here celebrating the 9th summit. The first one was in 1994, I think. We're back again in the city, back again in the United States, here this time in the City of the Angels. We've had 7 other summits, wonderful summits in wonderful countries in the hemisphere. We look forward to that work continuing. In addition to our distinguished speakers that we have tonight, I'd like to just acknowledge and welcome our friends from Ecuador, from Jamaica, and from Guatemala. They're here with us. I'd also like to introduce the Minister of Health and Social Security, Nicholas Steele of Grenada, and the Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce, Aubrey Hill of Jamaica. They can wave so people know where they're at. Now, we were to be joined here tonight by a 40-year friend of mine, Maxine Waters. But she had a passing in her family, I think, just this morning. So our hearts go out to Maxine. She's done wonderful work for Los Angeles over many decades. We have with us Representative Adrino Espaillat and Representative Sheila McCormick. Would you please wave? let people know where you are. We also have with us a number of ambassadors that I would like to introduce. If they could just briefly, very quickly wave, maybe stand up, but we're under a time schedule, so we'll try to move through this quickly. From Ecuador, Avon Baki. From Jamaica, Ambassador Audrey Marks. From Guatemala, Ambassador Alfonso Quiones. From Mexico, Ambassador Esteban Montezuma. From Brazil, Ambassador Nestor Forscher. From El Salvador, Ambassador Minila Yorga. Apologize for my pronunciation. From Trinidad and Tobago, Anthony Philip Spencer. From St. Kitts and Nevis, Ambassador Thelma Philip Brown. We also have the U.S. National Summit Coordinator, Kevin O'Reilly, whose tireless efforts helped to set the agenda for this. Give him a big hand. I would like to say that we've had a lot of ideas and a lot of new programs described in this convocation that we've all had together. The big secret and what I would charge you with is going back and continuing the good work that all of you have done here this last week. That's really important. It's important that we not let these things wait to the next summit, but you go back energized and participate in trying to make this hemisphere a better place to live. I'm going to do that myself with my country, the United States. I also have a personal objective to try to get my country to have its domestic politics influence less the relationships with countries in the hemisphere, and that we move beyond what I think we should have moved beyond a good number of years ago. I would like to introduce Melanie Chen, who is a member of the board of Atlantic Council with me and has been the creator of the Caribbean Initiative, a program that connects us with all of you in the Atlantic Council. So, Melanie.
Thank you, Bob. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, buenas noches. I led the establishment of our Caribbean Initiative with the intention of carving out a space in US and global policy to increase awareness to the challenges facing the Caribbean. Because of the nature of Caribbean economies, most leaders rely on all international institutions and allies around the world to secure access to goods and services for their citizens. Most Caribbean leaders refer to this as pragmatic foreign policy. In many ways, I share this vision with the region's leadership, and that is reflected in the pragmatic nature of the Caribbean Initiative. This approach has grown in importance because our hemisphere is faced with three major issues: the three C's: climate change, COVID-19, and conflict. Climate change does not have boundaries. It continues to produce stronger and more frequent hurricanes, such as the one that stormed through Mexico last week. It will take global teamwork to help mitigate its effects. The pandemic also transcended borders, and it took global efforts to get vaccines to the region. India, the African Union, the EU, Canada, China, and of course, the United States are among the countries that helped the Caribbean. And the recent invasion of Ukraine has seen food and energy prices soar, putting so many in the Americas at the mercy of global market volatility. All three Cs, in varying moments, have battered Latin American and Caribbean economies and citizens alike. These challenges, while having a disproportionate effect on some, impact the lives of everyone in the hemisphere, regardless of economic size or ideological affinities. No geographic border can contain rising sea levels or the next pandemic, and no border mitigated the global consequences from the war in Ukraine. But a fourth C has started to creep into discussions, policies, and legislation geared towards the region. This C is choice, one in particular that is forced potentially to take sides. While the implications of it might not be apparent at first, it can, in the long term, have devastating economic effects. As is the topic of tonight's dinner, these challenges can only be tackled effectively and equitably by working together. And in doing so, also allowing flexibility for countries in the hemisphere to welcome bilateral assistance from others around the world. The prosperity and security of Latin America and the Caribbean in the decades to come hinges on the opportunity to have and not eliminate choice in its direction. It is also time that we usher in another C, one that is often spoken of but has challenges to implement: cooperation. Cooperation as a mechanism that accounts for differences among us, but emphasizes the commonalities that we share. Cooperation as a platform that sees US attention to the region become more consistent through policies that achieve sustainable impact for the common person. Cooperation to see tangible solutions to the daunting challenges facing our hemisphere as an opportunity to work with all potential partners for the betterment of the region's future. So tonight, following the conclusion of the 9th Summit of the Americas, it is my hope that our conversations will help us to advance new cooperative mechanisms that prepare this hemisphere to stand up to the challenges of today and tomorrow. For our next conversation, I'm honored to introduce the Most Honorable Prime Minister, Andrew Holness from Jamaica. Prime Minister Holness, in office for over 6 years, is widely recognized as one of the Caribbean's premier leaders. He's the youngest person in Jamaica's history to be elected and re-elected as Prime Minister, and has distinguished himself throughout his career as a leader on issues of education. His policies have helped Jamaica through turbulent times due to the pandemic and hurricanes. Welcome, Prime Minister. I'll now hand it over to Jason.
Excellent.
Please, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you, Melanie, and Mr. Prime Minister. What an honor now to be with you here on stage. Please, another round of applause for Prime Minister Holness. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'll say, Mr. Prime Minister, before we go into our discussion, what a way to end this week in this beautiful room, and I'd like to thank the Jonathan Club for this amazing venue. Also, for those who joined the reception, there was art out there, artwork, which I hope people saw, from our artists from Los Angeles, and those artists are Chicano and Latin American artists, and hopefully we'll have some Caribbean artists next time as well, Mr. Prime Minister. But one of the artists, actually Patsy Valdez, is actually here with us tonight. I want to just mention that after we've had, Mr. Prime Minister, many months of build-up to the summit, And I think one thing is clear. We're going to talk with you. I'll talk with you about some of the accomplishments, but this room is clearly a room that doesn't want the summit to end. The leaders have already stopped convening, and we're all here for dinner talking further about the summit. So I think this is clearly a room of summiteers, and a lot was announced. Kevin maybe is less excited, but Kevin, a lot was announced this week from the U.S.-Caribbean partnership to address the climate crisis by 2030, which I look forward to your thoughts on, to the America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity, and a whole host of other issues. So it's a real pleasure to be with you, Mr. Prime Minister. I want to start off by asking about your opinion on the key takeaways. From your perspective, what do you see as the main accomplishments from the summit? And also, what are those main accomplishments, especially with regard to U.S.-Caribbean relations and moving forward in that regard?
Firstly, I would say that the summit process was a success. I would also say that I've been to many such summits and conferences. I think this one distinguished itself by virtue of the frank exchanges between the leaders, and especially between the United States and the various leaders of the region. I think the level of exchange was at a very frank level, and I think that would help the outcomes. I think for the United States, it would have signaled a very important shift in how the region views the United States. And I'm a Caribbean person, so I'm speaking mostly from a Caribbean perspective, but it may also be the perspective from the rest of Latin America. I believe President Biden was able to assure the leaders of his genuine interest in the region, and I think that's
fantastic.
important.
Yes.
I think most leaders would have come away being very impressed by the willingness of the United States to listen. It's forward-leaning in terms of wanting to hear what the problems are, and really good suggestions and policy initiatives were announced. Now, as to whether or not we will see the tangible outcomes from these, we'll wait patiently, and we will continue to engage and participate to get the results. But I think as far as summits and conferences go and the dialogue has gone, I would say it's a success.
You mentioned the importance of the frankness of those discussions among leaders. It's a really excellent point. Talk a little bit further about why you see those frank discussions as being so pivotal to addressing and moving forward the relationship across the hemisphere with the U.S., but also with the Caribbean and other countries across the region.
Well, I noticed on your map there that the Caribbean is effectively left off.
Oh gosh, I had.
But for my friends from Cuba, but it demonstrates a part of the challenge, right? For the U.S.,
I think that was an image from another place. I will tell you that image was not created by the Atlantic Council for sure.
No, but I think for the U.S., I mean, the U.S. spends a lot of attention in the Caribbean on Cuba, and that's a historical relationship and one that really needs attention. But I think the rest of the Caribbean feels that we're not being paid the attention that we should get, considering ourselves, as was described by a former president, as being the third border of the United States. And that has really transcended decades and many leaders, a sense of neglect. And Caribbean leaders have always been trying to reach out to the United States to say, pay some attention to the region, and for good reason. The region has significant resources. We have been a net exporter of talent and skills to the United States for a very long time. For example, Jamaica has, Jamaica's population is approximately 3 million people. We have, more than 1 million Jamaicans living here. Mm-hmm. And we have certain vulnerabilities. and particularly vulnerabilities over which we have no control or did not create. So the issues of climate change have really brought those vulnerabilities into focus. The cost to the Caribbean whenever there is a weather event, hurricane, storm, flooding, the destruction in infrastructure, and then the cost to repair. So we're constantly in a cycle of recovering from disasters that are essentially generated by climate change issues. But I think, aside from climate change, that obviously is an existential threat, there are some other issues that we face in the region. The President of Ecuador, when you ask him the question, what keeps him up at night, he says, well, you know, the drug trafficking, the crime and violence. Clearly within the region, Caribbean and in Latin America, the issue of violence and crime, and in particular, the illegal trafficking of light arms and small weapons is a major problem.
Yes.
It should be of concern that this region has the highest murder rate per 100,000 of all other regions in the world, including war-torn areas. And that's something that it's within our gift, I think, within our resources to address.
And, you know, Prime Minister, the reason we started the Caribbean Initiative at the Atlantic Council was precisely for the reasons you outlined, right? That there is a lack of concerted attention to the Caribbean and a lack of recognition overall about the importance. I think that's beginning to change. I think it was important to have Vice President Harris and President Biden meet with Caribbean leaders this week, and hopefully this additional attention. You were in Washington. We saw each other there a couple of months ago. Hopefully this attention to the Caribbean is not just the attention in the lead up to the summit, but it's a change in how we approach the Caribbean.
But the Caribbean is also could be a very important example for the rest of the world. You know, Jamaica is one of the oldest democracies in the world. We're one of the oldest 25 democracies in the world. And the region, generally, almost all the countries there are democratic countries. The challenge is that we embrace democratic principles and ideals. We are examples of strong democracies, and strong, not just, you know, we're liberal democracies. But we have not been able to convert the democratic principles into prosperity for our people. So there is still a high level of poverty in the region. And I think for the Caribbean, it's a very easy prospect with, you know, limited redirection of resources to make the institutions of democracy deliver prosperity and become an example to the rest of the world.
Financial inclusion is part of that, if you would agree, and that's been a long time a priority of our Caribbean.
Well, if you look at it in the context of what I've just said, I mean, you know, we're small economies, and we're too small to be cared for. In other words, you know, financial inclusion is important. Big banks are saying we have to de-risk. You know, you're too small to take a risk on. So what will happen to us? But wouldn't it be, you know, in the benefit of everyone if the region were given consideration?
Yeah. Well, that's
to be included in the financial system in a consistent and secure way.
You know, I think, as you know, you have a great supporters of the Atlantic Council, and that's been one of our top priorities since we began our Caribbean Initiative. And we were personally very pleased to see Chairwoman Maxine Waters send a letter to President Biden.
She's been a strong advocate for us. Strong advocate.
And she specifically asked for de-risking and financial inclusion to be included into the summit's agenda. The Americas Partnership for Economic Prosperity that was announced this week. How do you see that as helping to advance inclusion in Jamaica and in the Caribbean?
Well, we don't have all the details of it, but we gather it will be focused on market access, human resource development, access to financing, and these are all great things. For Jamaica, human resource development in terms of training and skills, that's absolutely very important for our development. We are now experiencing a skills shortage, which could become a constraint on our growth potential. So we have to be investing heavily now in reskilling, upskilling, and in ensuring that our population gets the right level of education to be able to function in this fourth industrial revolution as we try to change our economy. So any support in that regard would be very, very useful. I'm hoping that it will also focus on nearshoring. I think it's in the interest of the United States to secure its supply chain, to secure its, its strategic assets and markets by investing more in the region. So nearshoring it's critical. We have seen, by virtue of the geopolitical issues right across the world, that any disruption could have an impact locally in the United States. We saw that with the pandemic, obviously,
yes, right.
where critical medical supplies, which could be made in the region, made elsewhere, we couldn't get. But if you had the facilities and the infrastructure here, it could be done. So it's really a matter as to how the United States is going to work and cooperate with its private sector to kind of direct them more into the region. Because this region, this hemisphere, has all the resources to supply almost all the needs of the hemisphere. So it really comes down to the political will, the proper economic strategy, and the cooperation and willingness of all the partners.
Mr. Professor, I want to ask you about the U.S.-Caribbean Partnership to Address the Climate Crisis 2030, the PAC 2030 that was announced this week as well, which seems to set a new forward-looking direction for U.S.-Caribbean relations with regard to climate adaptation and also resilience and also clean energy. How do you see that the PAC 2030, especially being one of the world's most tourism-dependent economies and also a country focused very much on your own energy transition, how do you see PAC 2030 insofar as supporting the goals of Jamaica and the Caribbean overall?
Well, I mean, still we're short on specific details, but
so we have a lot of thought to do after the summit, right? A lot more dinners like this.
One of the good things about the summit is the agreement to have working committees established to pursue many of the commitments and announcements that were made. But it's clear that the aspiration is there, the idea is there, and I'm happy that the direction is being given. So I see it as a response to what we've been calling for a very long time, that we need accessible finance. Now, it's one issue to say we have billions of dollars for climate change, but you can't access it easily, or you can only access it after a disaster event, when you're really not in a position to make meaningful use of it anyway. So I'm hoping that the PAC 2030 will be proactive. It will take an innovative and enlightened view of the issue of climate change, and it will focus on important things, such as assisting in the building of infrastructure that is resilient, and most importantly, helping countries in the region transition to green, renewable, sustainable energy options, which would relieve us. Which was, relieve us from the vagaries of hydrocarbons, which seem to be influenced by geopolitical events, of which we have no control or cause.
Mr. Professor, I want to ask you a similar question I asked President Lasso. When you go back to Jamaica and you talk about what was achieved at the summit, what's your main message going to be to the Jamaican people?
Well, I'm going to say I'm hopeful. That's number one. But the Jamaican people would want to hear what is going to happen to energy prices. It's number one, because that is driving an inflationary bout through the economy. They're going to want to hear about what are we going to do about food security and food prices. No specific thing was obviously addressed for those two immediate issues. And I think, leaders throughout this hemisphere will have to engage their citizens and engage their patients and explain that what is happening is, beyond our control and not as a result of our actions. And that we're going to do as best as we can with our resources to temper the effects, these negative effects. But we're going to be working in an expedited way with our partners, and particularly with the United States, to bring to fruition some of these lovely announcements, such as the financing for climate change issues, which I'm hoping will bring greater infrastructure and energy transformation, and the America's Partnership for Economic Recovery, which I'm hoping will see expenditure on improving our ability to deliver healthcare and the development of our human capital.
I think you have a room full of people who agree with your hopes on those announcements. I want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for your leadership in the Caribbean, and to also acknowledge your excellent representative in Washington, Ambassador Marks, for all of her tireless efforts on it day-to-day. We're gonna come back, and we're so delighted to hear from Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, in a few moments, as well as Guatemala's Foreign Minister, Mario Bucardo. And I'll also say this has been very nice to be here in Los Angeles with you, Mr. Prime Minister. I hope the next time, though, we're together in Jamaica as well.
Yeah, open invitation, open invitation, and I will produce the correct map.
Yes. Well, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a short break. The program will resume in 10 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
Well, you're used to Ambassador. Huh? You're used to it at the Security Council.
A little bit. So I. Hello, good evening to everyone joining us here in person this evening and also for those joining us virtually. Hola, buenas noches para todos los que están aquí presentes con nosotros y además para los que están virtualmente en este programa con nosotros. Before I start, I just wanted to say how thrilled I personally am for the Summit of the Americas to be in my beloved city of Los Angeles. These policy conversations that usually happen in Washington are happening on the West Coast, and I believe that this creates more participation and involvement of all of the United States from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Pacific Ocean. I am Mexican-American, and I was born here in LA, and I have just been delighted that the Summit of the Americas has been here in my home. So I would like to get started by introducing our distinguished guests. First, we have His Excellency Mario Bucaro. Minister Bucaro has dedicated most of his working life to understanding and addressing the development of peace building and poverty reduction in Latin America. He serves as the National Director of Operation Blessing Guatemala, working in disaster relief and medical campaigns in the poorest areas in Latin America. We also have with us Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, representative to the United Nations, United States. Ambassador Greenfield has a foreign service career, including ambassadorship in Liberia, postings in Switzerland, Pakistan, Kenya, the Gambia, Nigeria, and Jamaica. Her career also includes serving from 2013 to 2017 as the Assistant Secretary of State for the African Affairs. And when Ebola outbreak erupted, Ambassador Thomas Greenfield led the international response that effectively slowed and stopped the pandemic. Very relevant experience for nowadays. Thank you both for being here tonight. I'd like to start with a question for Minister Bucaro. I heard several times this week Vice President Harris announced more than $1.9 billion in new private sector commitments to create economic opportunity in Central America. What impact do you expect this will have on migration in the region?
Thank you so much, Marianne, and thank all of you, especially all the members of the Atlantic Council, for giving me this opportunity and talk about my beautiful Guatemala. I'm also, I'm also a diplomat of career, and the diplomatic exercise that we saw during this summit, it was amazing, because what we saw is the unity among the private sector, governments, and social actors, so we can be able to come with solutions, but tangible. Because us diplomats, we love to talk, but sometimes we need action. And I say this important thing because today, Guatemala is the most resilient economy during the pandemic. went down almost 1.5, but we will grow 8%. So these 9 million US dollars that are committed are thanks to the company that trust Guatemala. Because today, not only we have this great advantage, but also we have been ranked by the World Bank and the MFA as one of the most stable and lowest debt in the region. And we are very proud of that as Guatemalans because today we can make a match. It's not about us Guatemalans, when we salute, we don't salute like this. We salute like this because we want to partner and make a win-win situation. And I want to just acknowledge that from this 9 million commitment, there's behind a 3 billion commitment from Millicom that I want to raise a big applause for Millicom that they already invested in Guatemala $3 billion. And companies like Millicom, PepsiCo, Walmart are coming with us on the side to be able to bring at least by 2030, 2 million jobs. And it can be done. It can be done because we're together, and that's the symbol that we want to reflect today. So I think that this is the great achievement of this summit.
Thank you very much for that. Ambassador Thomas Greenfield, as a follow-up more broadly, how can public-private partnerships help the U.S. address the changing, U.S. address the challenges facing its allies in the hemisphere?
Well, if we consider just the migration issue that we just discussed, we can look at how we might partner with the private sector to create jobs, to create opportunities for people. We know that many people migrate looking for opportunity. They are looking for jobs. And if those jobs are in their own countries, in their own communities, most of them would make the decision to remain at home with their families and to build on their lives there. So that's the first way that we can partner with the private sector. Second, if we look at the response to COVID, it is clear that we cannot address the challenges of a pandemic alone. We have to partner with the private sector. We have to partner with governments in the region. We have to partner with civil society to address the issues of the pandemic. It is not something that a government can carry out alone. It is not something that can be handed to a government to deal with. You have to develop relationships and partnerships to address the challenges that the pandemic presented us. And then finally, on climate change, it is absolutely imperative that we partner with the private sector so that we can start to address the dramatic impact that climate change is having across the regions. You know, whether it is dealing with building of infrastructure that responds to the impact of climate change, or it is helping countries to develop the policies that they need to address climate change and the impact on communities. We can't do it alone, and I think this summit over the course of the past 4 days, I think addressed those issues very, very well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador. So the next question is for you as well. Climate change is accelerating the frequency and intensity of natural disasters. Latin America and the Caribbean are disproportionately affected. They're the second most disaster-prone region in the world. How can the United States work with its partners in the Americas to build on agreements announced here in LA, and further address the causes of climate change, but also prepare for the next disaster?
Well, as you know, Vice President Harris announced this new initiative, and we really do think it will be a game changer in how we start to address the issues of climate change, which we've heard from our partners in the Caribbean and Latin America is one of their biggest challenges and highest priorities. We heard the Prime Minister of Jamaica raised concerns about the impact of climate change. I have been hosting what I call listening sessions in New York with our partners from the region. And not just this region, but across the globe. Climate change is one of the highest priorities. It's one of the biggest concerns that countries have raised. And they talk about their lack of capacity to address the issues that are being presented to them. And climate change can impact not just issues of poverty, but climate also impacts and presents security challenges to countries. So this initiative, I think, will start the process of addressing the root causes and it's a beginning to help countries respond to the impact of climate change on their populations.
Yes, thank you for that. Minister Bucaro, same question to you.
I think that the commitment of the President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris to be able to make a clear message on an action plan that we can be able to develop. It comes also with a concept that I want to acknowledge my dear friend and great ambassador in Washington, Alfonso Quiñones, that I truly admire because he told me a concept that I always were having my heart, that is called ally shoring. Think about it. Guatemala has said very clearly that Jerusalem is the eternal capital of the state of Israel. Guatemala is with Taiwan. And now Guatemala has condemned Russia for the invasion that they have done in Ukraine. All of these partnerships that we do on the globalized side, as allies and neighbors, as before to be a Secretary of State, I was the ambassador to Mexico. And now President López Obrador, President Biden, President Alejandro Yamatei has committed to straighten the border. So today we're celebrating also the commitment of a Japanese company that is going to establish spare parts in the border with Mexico and Guatemala, providing 10,000 jobs. And an investment that is not in the capital city of Guatemala, it's at the border. So this partnership, this alliance, comes with the alliance that we have in the global issues that we have, and that combination comes with this concept of ally shoring. It's not about just nearshoring, also realizing that the change of logistics has been broken, that we're struggling, that we cannot be able to address the facts that the cost of a container has going higher. So we need to go to our neighbors, to our partners. And that's the reason that Mexico, Guatemala, and the United States are more united than ever.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you. Minister Bucaro, Vice President Harris, along with Partnership for Central America, launched In Her Hands this week. This commitment will help empower women across the hemisphere, including Central America. What barriers are women facing in Central America and the hemisphere, and how will commitments such as In Her Hands help address some of these challenges?
Bueno, I think that the most important thing that we need to be realized is that we are very blessed. Actually, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala, I declare myself minority during the Women's Day because we will have more women than men. So we have a new generation of women that needs to be able to have the opportunity to be able to be part of this change. We're in a new generation of young Guatemalans that we can be able to be part of that. So this initiative comes also with this alliance and this partnership with the private sector. I don't want to say names, but it's important to be able to tackle, you can understand, PepsiCo has committed themselves to be able to bring a program that they're already doing to plant potatoes in Coban, Alta Verapaz. And this program will be extended so they can be able to produce all the products that come from corn from them. But this is very important because the commitment that comes with the vision of President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris that the program needs to have majority of women. And women can have that opportunity to be able to be there, and not in the field, but engineers, agriculture engineers from Guatemala, women that has that opportunity, and we can raise that voice, and they can have the opportunity to be present and make the change.
Wonderful, wonderful to hear. Ambassador Thomas Greenfield, one way to capitalize on the momentum of the summit is to strengthen the region's human capital, which is also a powerful tool to make migration an option rather than a necessity. Access to digital tools, finance, and strong education structures were cited as examples to improve human capital development when the Atlantic Council convened National Summit coordinators this year. What do you see as the role of the U.S. government, its private sector, and universities to advance the Americas Partnership for Economic Prosperity in a collective way such that the benefits of the new partnership are directly felt most tangibly by the citizens?
Well, let me just say that in our view, this is going to be a game changer in the region because it will start to address, again, root causes for migration. People will stay at home if they have opportunities at home. And this will be one way that we will work with our partners to build opportunities for populations. We also, I had some amazing meetings with young people during the conference, during the summit, who are working on all kinds of initiatives, building businesses, working on women, peace and security issues, civil society organizations working on human rights. And these are young people who really need to be supported. They don't need to be motivated. They're highly motivated. And many of these initiatives will focus on young people. It will focus on their hopes and dreams and how we give them the capacity and the wherewithal to pursue the dreams that they have for their country so that they can contribute to and give back to their countries.
That's right. Yes, thank you. As we women have done so in the United States, thanks to all the support that we have. So this question goes to you, Minister Bucaro. Regional integration and cooperation are a key facet of the summit and will be integral to implement agreements in the near future. How can Central American countries work closer within the organizations of American states and other regions, such as CARICOM? Yes.
Thank you so
Yes,
much. That's a great
how can
question.
we do that?
You know, we're very privileged this year to be able to be the chair of the ACS, the Association of the States of the Caribbean. It's the second largest organization after OEAS. And this is very important because now we're building a bridge among our brothers from the Caribbean to see a great Caribbean together. The base of the ACS is in Trinidad and Tobago, and we have approved of an action plan that includes Mexico, because the ACS cover all the Caribbean from Mexico to Colombia and all the countries of the Caribbean. So now we're thinking bigger. We need to be able to think not in the green agenda. We need to think in the blue agenda. We need to think in the blue economy. We need to be able to know that there's almost 100,000 jobs for workers in the sea. And we need to be able to have that opportunity also for everyone and take the great advantage of the education that we have at the Caribbean and the means that we have in the commodities in Central America. So for that, we need to build together, not only with ACS, SICA, CARICOM system, and also the fact that we are great working together in OEAS to build the logistics that they can be able to bring not only new agreements on being able to bring new airlines to both of our countries, working together also to build new cabotage lines also in maritime shores to be able to increase our commerce. But the most important thing is that we need to be able to realize that we need to protect the sea. and the reef that we have. So we're going all together as ACS to the COP27 in Egypt. We're going to propose not only the compensation that we need to have, but the protection that we have from the assets that belong to the world, but we are administrators. So that's the commitment, to work together, because we together, the region of the ACS, we represent 270 million people. So Guatemala alone is 16 million. The whole Central America region is 40. But together with the Caribbean, as brothers, we're 270 million persons willing to be able to make a new agenda for the world.
That's right. Thank you for that. Ambassador Thomas Greenfield, given your experience in Africa, how can the United States support Latin American, Caribbean countries that want to cooperate with other regions outside the hemisphere?
Well, I think we have a number of opportunities, and particularly in New York in the United Nations, where we do have all 54 countries from Africa represented, countries from the Caribbean there as well. And there are a number of opportunities for engagement. I will tell you, most recently, I have been working with Kenya on the Security Council on how Africa, countries in Africa, can promote African involvement in Haiti. And they've been very, very strong in their interest in engaging in Haiti, because they're, in their view, and I support that, there are a lot of lessons to be learned from the African continent that Haitians might benefit from. And Africans can bring their background, their experience, and many of the lessons that they have learned over the years to the situation in Haiti. And we've been engaging very, very extensively with the Africans on that. We can also provide platforms for young people to come together. We have an amazing program in Africa called the Young African Leaders Initiative, which I was engaged in establishing during the Obama administration. And this program brings hundreds of young Africans to the United States every year, except the past 2 years during COVID, but bringing them to about 25 universities across the United States, where they spend 6 weeks in leadership training. And they develop relationships and partnerships and long-term friendships. And I would love to see that program combined with a similar program in Latin America, and bring those groupings together so that we can have more synergy between young people in Africa and young people in the Caribbean and in Latin America.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that vision. Well, thank you, Minister Bucaro and Ambassador Thomas Greenfield, for your insights and perspectives tonight. Muchas gracias, Ministro Bucaro y Embajadora, por todo lo que nos han comentado esta noche. We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll come back and start the program again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Minister, thank you. I look forward to seeing you in New York.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will resume shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Diego Aria, Deputy Director for Strategic Development, Atlantic Council.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As my partner mentioned, my name is Diego Area. I am the Deputy Director for Strategic Development at the Agent Ash Latin America Center. Today is a very special day, and it marks the culmination of days, weeks, and months of hard work. After intense process of negotiation, countries have shared their commitments, and now we can finally move from dialogue into action. But this is also a time to reflect on the process, to look back. 8 months ago, with our partners from the State Department, I see some of them here, we had a vision to make the 9th Summit of the Americas inclusive, reflective, and relevant for our communities, of people's needs, struggles, and also people's hopes. To elevate the many voices that often go unheard when they matter most. Tonight, we're here to celebrate that vision, what it has accomplished, but most importantly, how it will evolve to support the implementation of the many agreements and initiatives arising from this week's summit. Since November, with the support of our incredibly talented and committed team, we generated meaningful connections among non-traditional actors with government officials, members of the private sector, NGOs, people that otherwise wouldn't have communicated and heard from each other. We also work to create awareness and visibility of the challenges facing Latin America and the Caribbean, including issues of social inclusion, economic recovery, climate change, democracy, and digital transformation. And as part of this vision, we launched a hemispheric-wide campaign, the Road to the Summit campaign. With this campaign, we were able to reach new and underrepresented audiences because we center our efforts on consolidating strong institutional partnerships with organizations across the hemisphere. In Latin America, we partner with organizations from Argentina to Central America. In the Caribbean, we have champions from Jamaica to Grenada. In the US, we partner with diverse organizations across both coasts. Some of our partners are here with us today in the room, others connecting from different countries. Today, we can say that the Road to the Summit campaign created more inclusive and collaborative spaces with our hemisphere. Yes, of course, we talked about all the problems, all the challenges and issues that affected everyone, but we centered the discussion on establishing solution-oriented agenda to address together the challenges that our region face. Please take a look.
There is a place in the world where people from different countries join with freedom as a shared purpose, where millions decided to walk together, to find their own path, and redefine the meaning of cooperation. It has been a challenging road, but we always kept together. During these difficult times, our continent has become proof of unity, hard work, ingenuity, and inclusion. Today, these values brought us here. We all reached the summit. But just to discover that our journey has not ended. Let's walk the road together with the certainty that we will need each other.
Allow me to share with you some of the concrete results of this campaign. We partnered and collaborated with over 30 organizations across the hemisphere. In a world where people don't often listen to each other, together we managed to reach over 40 million people in our conversations, and we did so through inclusive and innovative engagements, private virtual engagements, Twitter spaces, office hours with students connecting with government officials and members of the private sector, LinkedIn Lives, and public events. We connected the digital community. Now is the time to go to the ground and continue expanding the conversation. As we celebrate the successes of this summit, we recognize that there is much more to be done. The road continues, and in the next phase, we shall continue working together. We hope to expand the influence and impact of this summit, making the ideas of progress and cooperation shared a reality for everyone in the Americas. At the Adrian Ash Latin America Center, we're fully committed to continue fostering greater dialogue among these actors from the public and private sector and the people to tap into the great potential of our region and address the challenges as well as the opportunities in our shared future. I would like to give back the floor to our Deputy Director, Maria Fernanda Bosmosky, thanks to whom much of this became possible. For our last panel of the evening, thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. Mafe, the floor is yours.
Gracias, Diego.
Wow, those lights are bright. Almost as bright as the future of our region. Thank you. Diego, thank you so much for your introduction. Thank you so much for that video. Thank you, all of you, for being here. For those of you who are watching us via the live stream, thank you. It's made possible by the amazing broadband and telecom services. I'm so honored and happy to introduce our next panel, our final panel. I have 3 distinguished guests here with me, and I'm just so grateful for all of you. Carlos Felipe Jaramillo, I'm going to start introducing you. Carlos Felipe Jaramillo is a renowned expert in international financial institutions from the World Bank. He's a vice president for Latin America and the Caribbean. And as many of you know, as all of you probably know, the World Bank covers the whole world. Felipe and the World Bank provide countries with critical support toward a green, resilient, and inclusive recovery, including ways to mitigate the impacts of a learning crisis and climate change. In fact, this panel is going to cover themes of climate change, the impact on the region, and human capital development. The former being a challenge, a transnational challenge, and the latter being, I would say, a transnational opportunity. I also have with me Karim Lesina here to my left. Karim is Executive Vice President and Chief Affairs External Officer at Millicom Tigo. We just heard from the Foreign Minister of Guatemala the investment that Tigo has just done, Millicom Tigo in Central America, in the Northern Triangle. Karim, in his current position, helps develop Millicom, its global engagement strategy. He also oversees the company's regulatory affairs, corporate communications, and ESG functions. And last but not least, Valerie Lorena, thank you so much for being here.
Gracias.
Bienvenida. Gracias. Valerie is the Executive Director at the Young America's Business Trust. It's a nonprofit international organization that works in cooperation with the Organization of American States. You're an official partner of the Summit of the Americas. You had a forum on the sidelines. And Valerie is responsible for the design, implementation, and expansion of youth programs and works with multiple sectors and international stakeholders. You've worked with over 300,000 young leaders in the region. So, thank you.
Thank you.
But most importantly, Valerie has been working alongside us from day one of that Road to the Summit campaign that my colleague Diego was just explaining. So again, thank you all for joining us here. There's only one conversation standing between you and the weekend. So thank you so much. We're gonna get a lot packed into this conversation. So enjoy your dessert, and here we go. Felipe, let me start with you. Climate change and the pandemic, we know, have had an array of devastating effects on Latin America and the Caribbean. We just heard Prime Minister Holness, the Prime Minister from Jamaica talked about that devastating cycle that climate change is responsible for in our region, whether it's too much rain or too little of it. From the World Bank, Felipe, from the World Bank perspective, what role can the World Bank and other financial institutions play to support regional preparedness against disasters, and following on some of the announcements that came out this week?
Thank you, Mafe, for that question. I think Prime Minister Holness and all the leaders of the Caribbean were extremely eloquent of the imperative that climate change has for the region. And I'm going to stress in particular the problem faced by the Caribbean countries and the Central American countries who are the most affected by the hurricanes and the destruction that repeatedly has been affecting their economies for quite some time. And with climate change, these storms are getting stronger, more unpredictable, and more destructive. Mm-hmm. So there's this cycle of rebuilding the economy, rebuilding the critical infrastructure, housing, roads, and then comes another storm, and again you have to rebuild. And they said very clearly, we have a problem of high debt, because they need to get indebted often just to get the reconstruction going, get their economy back on speed. So I think this is a huge problem. It's only going to get worse, at least for the foreseeable future, until global emissions are under control. And I think we need to help these countries. We have been making more and more resources available. 10 years ago for the Caribbean, the World Bank was allocating about $1 billion per year. 5 years ago, $2 billion per year. This last 12 months, we're at a record $3 billion per year. And it's not enough. they need a lot more. So we need a lot more help from others, of course from the US, from the whole global community, because these countries are suffering from a problem that was not created by them. So I think it is a fair demand, and I do hope that we at the World Bank can help make the case, help channel some of those resources.
Thank you, Felipe. And of course, you need partners from the private sector and civil society. So Karim, from your perspective, how can the private sector help alleviate this problem?
Private sector is not happy there. So look, I think what we can do is, you know, it depends on the sector, right? I work for telecom, so we create the networks, and we are probably the first guys who answer as soon as there is a problem, because you need to connect the people reacting. You need to be sure that you're giving connectivity to the people the second after there is a disaster. So I think there is a lot done around resiliency. You need to be sure that you have an alternative if something breaks, and that's something that requires investment all the time. So when we look at a strategy like this, we don't look at a strategy that is happening only when there is a crisis. It needs to be a constant analysis of the problem. And this is something that we need to keep our eyes open. So what I'm trying to say is, I don't have to wake up when there is a hurricane or something. I need to know that I will be able to plan or to try to anticipate what's going on, and to be sure that I will create alternatives. That's the first part. Obviously, our sector has a peculiar role in doing that, so you need to be also sure, for the governments that are here, that we have the authorization to go out the second after something is happening. Sometimes it's too complicated to get our engineer or our technician on the road to repair because of limitation of national security and etc. And this is one of the biggest problems, so that's the second point. And third, I think this is a commitment that the companies needs to do to climate change fight. I think, there are not enough companies yet that have went with very strong climate targets. I think we need to do more. There is a big change going on, but really doing it and efficiently, working as a priority, and in the case of our sector, working with the governments, because a big part of our climate targets come from electricity production. So it needs to be a win-win and really a PPP between private and public to try to come with a solution. So for me, that's really the three main points I will focus on.
Thank you, Karim. Valerie, Karim was just talking about the importance of public-private partnerships. It's something that keeps coming up in these conversations here at the summit and everywhere, because we recognize the importance of working across sectors. You're in the civil society sector, so from your perspective, during the recovery that Karim was also mentioning just now, what can governments and the private sector and financial institutions do to ensure that help and tools, opportunities reach the younger generation so that nobody is left out of this recovery?
María Fernanda, muchas gracias por esa pregunta. Thank you so much for that question. I want to take the opportunity to thank you for the invitation to be here. As my friend Diego Arias said, we cerramos con broche de oro. We leave the best for the last, and we are the dessert of this conversation, so thank you so much for the invitation. Going back to your question, and also a little bit on building on what my fellow panelists said, climate change is very close to young people. The opportunities that we can provide to them are very clear. They take advantage of them. First, I would like to say that we have to build these programs with young people involved in them. We cannot just say, okay, this is what we have been doing for so many years, this is what works, here, take it, this is for you. We cannot continue doing that. We have to involve them from the design of a program, of a policy that is going to affect them as individuals. As an example, we had the opportunity to develop the Caribbean Innovation Competition in partnership with the World Bank a few years ago, Señor Jaramillo. Focus on resilience, focus on disaster preparedness, what innovations are used in the Caribbean advancing in order to face climate change. And it was a success. But the design of that program was not just YBT telling them or our partners telling them, here, use it. They went with us to write the rules, write what we needed to do with them. And I think that's a very clear example. On the role of private sector, we wouldn't be able to do anything that we do if it wasn't with the support of governments, international organizations, and the private sector itself. PepsiCo, Google, YouTube, Shopify, they put investment in youth for them to create these solutions and bring them to the Summit of the Americas. Ambassador Thomas Greenfield was yesterday with us in the Innovation Expo of the Young Americas Forum, and she mentioned it very well. Young people are not just waiting for the change to happen. They are making the change. And we have to take them into consideration in policy making and in programs and investment from the private sector.
Thank you, Elodie. And Felipe, let me go back to you. Picking up on that last point about youth, picking up on Valerie's comments involving youth from the beginning. Can you talk from your perspective, from where you're at? How do you see youth potential, and what programs are you working on at the World Bank that could help the region leapfrog to the next stage of its growth? Like, what are some of the main programs that you would highlight on youth, and also, if I may, digitalization, which is something that we've heard time and time again here at the summit, the importance of interconnectedness?
Thank you, Mafe, for that question. We're pushing hard on both, on digitalization, because without digital training and digital access, there will be no jobs in the future of Latin America. And I think companies like Tigo are critical. We need the private sector to help move quickly for internet access to all. And we're moving forward with the Prime Minister called for reskilling, training youth so they can really have access to the jobs of the future. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention my real concern in the very short run. There is a silent crisis that most people haven't really focused on in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I say silent because people are not speaking much about it. And that's the simple fact that the majority of children and youth missed at minimum a year of schooling with the pandemic. In many cases, a year and a half. In some cases, 2 years of schooling. In our studies, when you miss a year to 2 years of schooling, your wages, your salaries in the future will fall on average by somewhere between 10 and 15%. So I call it a silent crisis because I don't see too many people aware of this. We had a call for action a week ago with the President of Honduras, Chile, Argentina, and Ecuador, President Lasso, to raise awareness that we need to do catch-up programs right away. There's 3 things to do very quickly. First, bring the kids back to school. There are still children in the region that are not going to school. You need to bring them to school, assess where they are, how much education, how much learning they lost in these last 2 years, and right away launch catch-up programs to make sure that they bump up their education level. And finally, we need to train the teachers so they can do this. We need to support the teachers. They have a major role to play in this.
Thank you, Felipe and Karim. Many people have been talking about we're at the eve of another lost decade in Latin America and emphasizing the importance of education. Again, interconnectedness, digitalization, that's you. And so one way to capitalize on the momentum of the summit is to strengthen the region's human capital, continue to work towards that goal. Again, access to digital tools, finance, and strong education structures were cited as examples when we convened at the Atlantic Council National Summit Coordinators this year. So my question to you, Karim, is how can companies such as yours increase digital connectivity across Latin America and the Caribbean to support some of these programs that Felipe was just talking about?
Okay, and sorry for my voice, but I'm fighting with an allergy since I arrived here. And it has been fun, with the summit. At least I still have my voice. So look, I think what we need to look at is 2 points mainly. First is connectivity. And I'm not going to bore you on a Friday night on the reason why it's so complicated to deploy networks. That's very engineered. But the reality is, it needs to be a strategic priority of the governments. Meaning, if you really believe that the priority is to connect everybody, you need to work with your operators, because we are operator only in 9 countries. We have the pleasure to be our main operation in Guatemala, but we are also in all Central America, Colombia, Paraguay, and Bolivia. But you need to work with those governments in order to define the priorities and to be sure that you're able to attract that private capital that is going to allow you to build in the rural areas, in the areas that are uncovered, and really work on PPPs. You know, we have great projects going on in Panama with President Cortizo and in El Salvador with the government of President Bukele that are giving incredible results on that. And it's really working together. That's the first part. There are things very boring, like how you assign spectrum, authorization to put your antennas. You will be surprised of the basics of it. But it's not even money. It's really working together to find the right condition. The second part is this. I'm a son of an immigrant and a son of an immigrant, okay? And I'm an immigrant myself, and my kids are immigrants. There is one thing that I know. You don't immigrate because you prefer the food or the music or the cinema of the country where you go. You immigrate because you're looking for a job. You immigrate because you're looking for a better life. So the reality is that we have to work all together in order to create those opportunities for the youngs to have access to a very good education. We do it with several programs ourselves, but you know, we are a $2 billion company and 20,000 employees, so we're not changing the world, but we do our part in our countries. And what we are trying to do is really to give the opportunity to access the information. This is what technology comes. But also there, it needs to be an integration between what private is doing and what public is doing, because the education is not controlled by the private sector. The private sector can come, can help Microsoft, Amazon, Cisco. They have incredible projects, Coca-Cola. But it needs to be acknowledged by the local government, and especially in this case as the Minister of Education, that you can work together. Too many times, there is a huge dualism, or there is a huge opposition between private and public, especially when you look at there. And that's a pity, because there are great projects that could be done at the end for the good of those kids that don't have access. And let me finish with one thing. I will not be here if my mother would not have access to a great education in Tunisia in the 60s, and if my father would not have had education in the Italian army in 47 after the Second World War. Because my grandfather was a postman, and my grandfather in Tunisia was also a very poor man. So the reality, education is everything. So for me, two top priorities. Connectivity and education, and it should be basic, to be honest.
No, I agree, Karim. I want to close with this one question for all three of you, and Valerie, I'll start with you. What commitments of this week, what summit commitments and announcements are you most excited about from where you are at Young America's Business Trust?
Two of them are very particular for young people, are very important for young people in particular, is the green future and digital transformation and connectivity. Why? We know that we cannot continue the fast pace of consumption of our environments and our natural resources. They are very concerned about it. So I think if we put the political commitments in the eyes of young people, then they understand that there's going to be something. But it's not enough. It's not enough. It's also necessary to continue investing on their initiatives. As I was explaining a little bit ago, they don't just sit and wait for someone else to take action. They are taking action. No? We see this in the innovation competitions that we have. We have 4,000 young people just telling us solutions on plastic reduction, just on that specific concern. If we don't invest in them, if we, by the way, investing on young people it yields great economic and social results. It's studies from Mr. Jaramillo's team that they demonstrate this. If we don't continue taking them into consideration, into these commitments, into these actions, we are going to fail them. Not only, I consider myself the old generation. Some of them tell me, no, Valerie, you're still young. I am not. I have been here for a while. We cannot continue failing them. So one of the political commitments that is very important for them is that one. The other one, connectivity and digital transformation, as we were explaining. It's crucial as in the next generation of employment and opportunities. I think that's where they see the most. And I'm not saying it by myself. It's 27,000 young people were involved in this Summit of the Americas process. Oh, wow. And their concerns, their priorities were in the 8 political commitments, but in these two in particular. What I'm trying to say is also the governments, they took the responsibility to listen to them. Some of them came to receive the EU Declaration of Commitment, but not all of them. So we have to continue working on bringing the governments to the table with the young people.
There's still a lot to be done, but Felipe, from the World Bank, what summit commitments and announcements are you all most excited about?
I guess what I would highlight from my standpoint is that many of the leaders mentioned, again, trade. These summits were started in the US in Miami in 1994, and it was about trade and trade integration. A number of the leaders said, it is amazing that all this time has passed and trade within Latin America and the Caribbean is 14% of all trade, 1-4. And that the growth of trade over the last 20 years has come mainly trade outside the region. And a lot of that trade, raw materials, minerals, basic foodstuffs. The region has not really developed well. I saw more consciousness and awareness that the region needs to do a lot more on trade. I think we heard President Lasso was very eloquent about how trade will trigger investment, will trigger jobs, and will trigger welfare. So I'm excited that hopefully some of that realization will come into action.
Karim, what about you?
Look, let me say that I agree with the two of you. It's totally right. There's one thing that, as a businessman, I think we probably wanted to see a little more. He's talking about, I'm not going to say economic recovery, because I don't like the recovery word, because we have been working all like crazy during this pandemic. But it's how to boost economy. It's how to boost investments. It's how to attract more capital into the region. Because I'm a believer that when capital will flow in the region, you will create all those opportunities that we are talking about. So the priority should really be looking at the region in a strategic way and start creating models that not only put public money into it, but really look at the bottlenecks that industry has been talking about in the past years and develop that work to destroy those bottlenecks. There is one thing that we can learn from this COVID crisis, is that we have been working all together, governments and companies and civil society, to overthrow a crisis. Let's not forget that. Let's not start again where we were 2 years ago when we were fighting every time that there was a piece of legislation or whatever. Let's be all together for the good. If we learn that, I love it. I love the video that you were showing before, because it started with something that you guys, we are all used to, right? A Zoom, Ring Central, Cisco, Teams, whatever tool, so nobody can be upset with me that I'm citing one company compared to the others. But there is one thing that people would not even consider. That life was inexistent 2 years before. It was only for corporations to be using Cisco. And it became the way for my kids to have access to school. And that thing was based on really a PPP. Because it was telecom operators and everybody working together, but it was also school putting the content, more capacity, and etc. Let's learn from that. Let's not forget that, and let's not wait another crisis, because I'm a little fed up about that. Let's not wait another crisis to go back there.
But from crisis comes opportunities, I think. Thank you so much, Valerie, Felipe, Karim. Thank you so much, everyone who's here.
Thanks to you, Maria Fernanda.
Thank you. To close out, I'd like to invite Senior Director Jason Marsek to take it home.
I want to thank everybody. I also want to thank those watching via video from the USS East Coast. Thank you for spending your first minutes of your Saturday morning with us, talking about the road to the summit. I'd like to just end by thanking the incredible team that I'm so privileged to work with that helped to put together this stage. If you're part of the team that put this together, please raise your hand. We want to acknowledge you for your excellent work. Ambassador Thomas Greenfield, thank you for staying with us through the dinner. Thank you for your comments. All the other ambassadors from the Caribbean and from Latin America, thank you for being here, and the many other guests. I'd like to also thank our Angelino host here at the Jonathan Club, Marianne Walker, Melanie Chen, Bob Abernathy. Thank you all from the Atlantic Council Board for being here. So the official program has ended, but please feel free to continue mingling. It's only 9:15. There's still plenty of time left in the evening until the next summit or until the next time back in Los Angeles. Thank you very much, everyone.
What? Sure. Valerie. Gracias. Gracias. Sé que se tenía que ir. Gracias. No, gracias.
Santa Marta tiene tren, Santa Marta tiene tren.